things change, right? Sometimes slowly and sometimes, bam, it feels like the whole landscape shift. Well, that's kind of how I'm feeling about some stuff going on in media right now. In particular, this whole Jeremy Boring thing at the Daily Wire. It's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I can see that. Whenever there's a change at the top, especially in an organization as influential as the Daily Wire, it definitely raises questions.
Yeah.
And sparks curiosity. What's really going on here?
For sure. Like, think about it. The Daily Wire started as this tiny startup back in 2015. They had like 4.7 million in seed funding, which is nothing to sneeze at. But to go from that to being this media powerhouse valued at over $1 billion, that's pretty wild. And Jeremy Boring has been there through it all. I mean, he's been a co-CEO since 2019 alongside Caleb Robinson. So yeah, this news definitely has people talking.
And rightfully so. His role in shaping their commercial strategy, their whole approach, it's hard to overstate how important he's been to their success. So to see him stepping down, well, it's a big moment for them.
Totally. We're not here to, take sides or anything like that. We just want to look at the facts, see what we can glean from the information out there, and try to understand what this might mean for the Daily Wire moving forward. To do that, we've got a few sources we're going to dive into. We've got an article from Axios, which lays out some of the basics. And then we've got these YouTube channels, Echoes from Above and Nikki West, which offer some, shall we say, more colorful perspective.
I like it. That mix of official reporting and more opinionated takes. It should give us a good sense of the different narratives swirling around this whole thing, even if some things remain kind of, open to interpretation.
Exactly. So let's start with what we know for sure, straight from Axios. Jeremy Boring is stepping down as co-CEO, the stated reason, to devote more time to creative projects. Specifically, he's going to focus on finishing up the Pendragon cycle, which is this TV series he's directing and executive producing.
Interesting. So it sounds like a creative pivot, a shift in focus towards his artistic passion.
Right. Now, the article also mentions that Caleb Robinson, who was the founding CEO and has been sharing the co-CEO role with Boring since 2019, is going to become the sole full-time CEO. But here's the thing. Boring isn't completely cutting ties. Axios says he'll still have an advisory role at the company, and he'll keep hosting Daily Wire backstage. So the official narrative is Boring's stepping back from the day-to-day, but he's still involved strategically, and he's still got his on-air presence.
Okay, so it's not a clean break, more like a strategic realignment. He's leveraging his creative talents, but his institutional knowledge and his public persona remain valuable assets.
Now, this is where things get a little more interesting. Our YouTube sources, they bring in some context that, well, it adds a layer of intrigue to the whole situation. Echoes from Above, right off the bat, points out the timing of the announcement, March 18th, 2025. They note that it's awfully close to the one-year anniversary of Candace Owens leaving the Daily Wire, which was March 22nd, 2024. And, oh yeah, they also bring up Brett Cooper's exit, which happened sometime in that same year. So all these departures happening within a relatively short time frame, it makes you wonder, is there a connection?
It does, doesn't it? When you see that kind of turnover, especially involving such prominent figures, it's natural to look for some kind of underlying cause. Like, is there something bigger going on?
Exactly. And Echoes from Above, they're pretty skeptical of the whole creative projects explanation being the whole story. They speculate that there might be two main reasons, really, why Boring's stepping down. One is major internal conflict, though they admit that, based on what they know, that seems less. But the other reason they propose, and they seem to lean towards it, is financial problem. They argue that losing Candace Owens and Brett Cooper might have led to a decline in viewership and people canceling their subscriptions, which, could hit them in the wallet pretty hard.
That makes sense. I mean, media is a business, especially when you're relying on subscription revenue. Losing popular personalities, those who really draw in viewers, could definitely have an impact on their bottom line.
Totally. And Echoes from Above, they actually pull out some numbers to back up this claim. They compare how many views Candace Owens and Brett Cooper are supposedly getting on their independent content to how many views the Daily Wire's main YouTube channel has been getting lately. And they say it's a huge difference. Like, the Daily Wire's channel has 3.9 million subscribers, which is a lot, but they highlight this one recent video that only got like 16,000 views. And they're like, that's pathetic for a channel that size. Obviously, it's just one video and it's coming from a YouTube channel, so take it with a grain of salt. But still, those numbers, if they're accurate, they don't look great.
No, they don't. Yep. If that's indicative of a broader trend, it could mean that there's this big gap between the number of people subscribed to their channel and the number of people actually watching their content. And that could be a red flag for a media company. It raises questions about audience loyalty, about whether their content is still resonating.
Right. So building on that, Echoes from Above throws out another idea, pretty spicy one. They speculate that Ben Shapiro, co-founder, big name, lots of influence, they speculate that he might have been the one who pushed for this leadership change. Their thinking is Shapiro sees this potential decline in revenue and thinks, okay, we need a shakeup at the top. A change in direction, maybe. Again, just speculation, but it's an interesting thought.
Oh, definitely. It fits with this narrative of financial pressures being a big factor. And given Shapiro's role, his investment in the Daily Wire, both literally and figuratively, it's not hard to imagine him wanting to take action if he felt like things were headed the wrong direction.
Now, Nikki West, she's skeptical too. She's like, it's not every day that you see a CEO, especially a co-founder who's been so central to a company's success, just up and stick down and work on some creative project. There's this sense that, well, maybe that's not the whole story. Maybe there's more going on behind.
I think that's a fair point. CEO transitions, they usually happen for a reason. Strategic shifts, challenges within the organization, a need for fresh leadership. Those are all common reasons. So to see someone leave, seemingly voluntarily, to pursue creative work, it does make you wonder if there's more to it.
Absolutely. Plus, Nikki West points out that Boring's new role, this advisory role, it's kind of vague, isn't it? Like, what does that actually entail? How much influence will he still have? And then there's the timing. The fact that this announcement comes right around the anniversary of Candace Owens' firing. Nikki West calls it chef's kiss irony and even karma. So clearly, some people see a connection between those events and are interpreting them in a very specific way.
Yeah, the timing does kind of create a narrative, whether it's intentional or not.
Yeah.
It's hard not to notice it. And how people interpret it, well, that probably depends on their existing views on the whole situation.
Definitely. And speaking of views, it's interesting to look at how some of the former Daily Wire personalities have reacted to all this. Brett Cooper, she posted a meme about it. A Jimmy Fallon meme, to be exact, so take that as you will. But both Nikki West and Echoes from Above highlight that Brett Cooper also publicly said she was excited for Ben Shapiro and Caleb Robinson to take the company forward. On the other hand, neither Matt Walsh nor Michael Knowles had said anything publicly at the time that Nikki West made her video. Now, these reactions, or lack thereof, they can sometimes be revealing, can't they?
Oh, for sure. When people are part of a tight-knit group, their public statements or their silence, it can speak volumes. Like Cooper's positive comment, it can mean different things. Maybe genuine support, maybe a bit of shade, who knows?
Yeah.
And the silence from others, that could be significant too, depending on their past relationships and their public personas.
Okay, are you ready? This is where the speculation really goes into overdrive. Nikki West, she says she heard a rumor, attributed to Ian Carroll, that there's some private equity interest in buying the Daily Wire. And Echoes from Above mentions this too. They even name Silver Lake Capital as a potential buyer. Both channels also bring up these allegations of financial problems that have been swirling around the Daily Wire for a while, going back to 2023. There's talk of a hiring freeze, and even whispers that Boring and Shapiro had to personally inject money into the company to keep it afloat. If even a fraction of this is true, it paints a very different picture than the one we get from the official announcement.
Yeah, this is serious stuff. Talk of private equity usually means that a company seen as having potential, but also needing some kind of shakeup, maybe restructuring to become more profitable. An acquisition could be part of that.
Right. And then there's the Pendragon cycle. Nikki West, again citing Ian Carroll, says that it was originally supposed to start streaming in 2024, but that obviously didn't happen. So what's the holdup? On top of that, there's this claim floating around that the project is way over budget, like something crazy, like $50 million. Now, that kind of cost overrun, especially for a production like this, that could put a real strain on a company's finances.
No question. Delays and budget blowouts, those can be huge problems for a media company, especially one that's trying to grow and expand into new areas. It can limit their ability to invest in other projects and, well, it can hurt their bottom line.
And this is the big one. Both YouTube channels, they allege that Jeremy Boring basically lied to the press. They say he told reporters that Fox News was interested in acquiring the Daily Wire. But the implication is he made it up. The idea being that he was trying to drum up interest in a sale to make it seem like the Daily Wire was this hot commodity. If that's true, that's a pretty big deal.
Oh, yeah. That's not just gossip. That's potentially crossing an ethical line. If a company leader is misleading the press, especially about something as significant as a potential acquisition, that could damage their credibility, their relationships within the industry.
So on top of all this, we also get some criticisms of Boring's leadership style in these YouTube videos. Echoes from Above mentions this anecdote about people within the Daily Wire calling him God King behind his back, which, suggests a certain perception of how he runs things. Both channels also criticize his public persona and how he's handled certain controversies. The Candace Owens and Brett Cooper departures, the whole Steven Crowder thing, even the problems with their razor business. They basically argue that he's made some missteps.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because how a leader handles these kinds of situations, it can have a big impact on a company's internal culture and their public image. It can affect employee morale, how the public perceives them, especially for a company like the Daily Wire, which is so out there, so vocal in the public sphere.
Now, in the interest of fairness, We do need to acknowledge the stuff in the Axios article that actually paints Jeremy Boring in a very positive light. They talk about how he's been instrumental in the Daily Wire's commercial success. They credit him with leading their expansion, with creating and growing Daily Wire Plus One, with launching BentKey, and with building their e-commerce business into what they describe as a significant revenue stream. So it's clear that he's had a major positive impact on the company.
Oh, absolutely. You can't take away from his achievements. Under his leadership, the Daily Wire has grown tremendously, diversified its offerings, and really established itself as a force in the media landscape. So, yeah, he's made some big contributions.
So here's the recap. Officially, Jeremy Boring is stepping down as co-CEO to focus on his creative project, specifically the Pendragon site. Caleb Robinson is taking over as the sole CEO, and Boring will stay on in an advisory role and continue to host Daily Wire Backstage. That's the news, straight up.
Right. But then you've got these YouTube sources. They're adding all these layers of speculation, financial struggles, dissatisfaction with Boring's leadership, rumors of an acquisition. They're suggesting that there might be a lot more to this story than meets the eye.
Exactly. And it's important for you listening to remember that these are just interpretations and claims coming from YouTube channels. This isn't like hard-hitting investigative journalism. We're not saying any of this is true, but it's out there, it's part of the conversation, and it's worth considering.
It really highlights the difference between, what's officially reported and what's circulating in these more informal spaces online. The full picture, the truth of what's going on with Jeremy Boring and the Daily Wire, it's probably somewhere in between.
I think a key takeaway here is that leadership changes, especially in media, they're rarely simple. There's always the public-facing reason, but there's often so much more going on behind the power dynamics, financial pressures, creative visions clashing with business realities. It's complicated.
It's a good reminder, too, of how these companies, these media outlets, they're not just about ideas, they're businesses, and they have to operate within that context. And sometimes that means making tough decisions, making changes at the top, even if it ruffles some feathers.
So here's something to think about. The Daily Wire grew like crazy under Jeremy Boring's commercial leadership. But now, with this shift towards creative projects, with all these other events and rumors swirling around, what does it say about their priorities moving forward? What challenges do you think they might be anticipating in the media world, in the culture at large, that would lead to such a significant change for a company that's so visible, so outspoken? It's going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out.